All right, let's jump into another deep dive. This time we're going to tackle the language system of the Kingdom of Qherena.
Fascinating place.
It is. And we've got this document, language tier 250-105-155-904.pdf.
Right.
It details their language hierarchy.
8 tiers.
8 tiers, yeah, and it's a lot. And get this, every citizen has to master at least 5 variations of their languages.
Wow.
To help break this down, we've got our language and social systems expert. Welcome to the show.
It's great to be here. It's a really unique system, I've got to say. Even just looking at how these tiers are structured, you really start to wonder about Qherena's history.
Okay, so the document lays these 8 tiers out pretty clearly.
It does.
What, in your opinion, does each level tell us about this society?
Well, the most basic level, I guess, is the global business homeworld planetary language.
Okay.
It's described as the respected power language.
Interesting.
Which immediately suggests that Qherena isn't isolated. This is a society that's connected to a wider world, maybe even, interstellar.
So we're not dealing with, like, a single planet situation.
Right, exactly. There's interaction here, maybe even integration with a larger community.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
So right off the bat, there's evidence of this connection.
Yeah.
What about the next tier up?
Well, the next level is the government royal language.
Okay.
Seems pretty self-explanatory.
Right.
The language of officials, in court, government documents, probably within the royal family itself.
Fit for a king.
Exactly.
It makes me wonder, though, is this royal language derived from the global language, or is it something entirely separate?
It's a great question. Unfortunately, this document doesn't have those details, but we can look at patterns on Earth, right? Languages of power often evolve from or are heavily influenced by languages of conquest or trade.
That makes sense.
So maybe something similar happened with the Qherenan global language? Maybe it had a big impact on the development of their royal language?
Yeah, history tends to leave its fingerprints on language.
It really does.
Yeah. As we move up, things get even more interesting. We hit this community, tribal, village, county language.
Right,
Then
yeah.
state, province, and then national country. It's like linguistic nesting dolls.
It's fascinating. The structure really suggests, to me at least, that Qherena's has very strong regional identities
Okay.
and a history of localized governance, right?
Oh, interesting.
Each level seems to reflect a different layer of social organization administration.
I mean, this is incredibly complex. With all these layers, are there frequent miscommunications?
It's definitely possible. Imagine having to constantly adjust your language depending on, who you're talking to, the context of the situation. There's a lot of room for misunderstandings there, especially when you're trying to navigate all the different social groups.
It's a lot to juggle.
It is.
And with a 5-language minimum, language mastery must be incredibly important in the society.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. I mean, in a society where language is so deeply intertwined with social structure, being able to navigate all these tiers, it's highly valued. It's not just about communication. You're demonstrating social intelligence, understanding, this whole web of power dynamics.
It's not just what you say, it's how you say it.
Exactly.
And to whom. That leads us to this next tier, regional directional city language, which the source material refers to as dialects.
Dialects, right.
Yeah.
The spice of life.
They are.
But in a system like this, I think dialects play a really significant role in shaping social identity and interactions.
So the system, how does it impact their social structure then?
Well, if we think about how language reflects social hierarchies on Earth, it's pretty reasonable to assume something similar is happening in Qherena's.
The document mentions that Qherena's has high, middle, and low social classes. How do you think these classes might intersect with this crazy language hierarchy?
It's very likely that in Qherena's, language mastery is a marker of social standing. Imagine, the high Qherenans. They might speak a very refined, almost aristocratic version of the royal language, right? While the low Qherenans might use more colloquial variation.
That makes sense. And maybe access to certain language tiers is, restricted or limited based on your social class. Maybe only the high class is allowed to learn the spiritual language.
That's a very intriguing possibility, because restricting access to certain tiers would definitely be a way to maintain that social stratification.
Right.
It creates a linguistic barrier, reinforces existing power dynamics.
Okay, so we've got these social classes, this complex language system.
Yeah.
And just when you think it can't get any more complicated, we get family language.
Oh, yeah.
What's going on there?
Well, this is where we get a peek into the more intimate side of Qherena's society, right?
Okay.
Family language suggests a strong emphasis on those family bonds, the transmission of, unique traditions, knowledge, through generations.
So like a linguistic heirloom.
Yeah, it's passed down within families, adds another layer of complexity to their communication.
I have to wonder, how do Querexkins handle like the cognitive load of constantly switching between these languages?
Well, studies have shown that multilingualism has significant cognitive benefits, right?
Right.
It can actually enhance problem-solving skills, it can improve memory, it can even delay the onset of age-related cognitive decline. So it's possible that growing up in such a linguistically rich environment has actually shaped the Querexcan brain.
Wow. So they're like walking brain gyms.
In a way, yeah, their brains are constantly working, processing, switching between all these variations, and that could be contributing to a higher level of cognitive function.
This is blowing my mind already. And we haven't even gotten to the top tier, the spiritual language.
Right, this is probably the most intriguing one. It's reserved for those sacred rituals, spiritual practices. It suggests a deep connection to a belief system that goes beyond, the day-to-day.
So it's a language that's almost shrouded in mystery.
Yeah, it is. It's imbued with a sense of the sacred.
Wow. It's amazing how language can create that sense of awe, reverence. So we've got this 8-tiered system, every citizen mastering at least 5 variations. That's just mind-boggling.
It really is. It's a remarkable feat of linguistic agility. And it raises so many questions, about their education system, their social interactions, the impact this has on their entire culture, their worldview.
I am hooked. We've only just started to explore Querexka's language.
There's so much more to discover. Welcome back to our exploration of Qherena. Last time we talked about their 8-tiered language system.
Yeah, we were just starting to understand how complex communication must be in a society like that. Every interaction seems to involve these language choices and social cues and this web of power dynamics.
Right, it's like they're always navigating a linguistic maze, and every turn reveals another layer of meaning, social significance.
Okay, so let's picture actually living in this society. Let's say you're a Querexkan citizen going about your day. What kind of linguistic challenges would you run into?
Let's imagine you're a farmer. You wake up, you greet your family using your family language full of shared memories and inside jokes. But then you head to the market to sell your produce.
Oh,
Now you're switching to the community language to haggle with your neighbors and customers.
so every interaction requires a careful thought about what language to use.
Exactly. And it gets even more interesting when you think about interacting with someone from a different social class.
Right, because what if this farmer needed to talk to, like an official?
Right, if they had to petition a local official for something, they might have to switch to the state-province language.
Yeah.
That's more formal, more standardized.
That's a huge leap, going from the intimacy of family language to the formality of state-province language.
It is.
It seems like language could be a real barrier in this society.
It definitely could be. Imagine someone from a rural community, used to their community language, suddenly in a courtroom where everyone's speaking the royal language. That could be very intimidating.
Definitely. You mentioned earlier the cognitive benefits of being multilingual.
Yeah.
But couldn't this system also lead to, like, divisions, social inequality? It seems like those who don't have a good handle on those higher language tiers would be at a disadvantage.
That's a really important point. Yes, the system might boost cognitive abilities, but it also has the potential to make social stratification worse. Access to education, to resources, even social mobility could be tied to how well you can navigate this complex language system.
What about their education system then? How do they teach all these variations?
It has to be a very demanding system. Kids must spend years memorizing all these vocabulary words and grammar rules, the social nuances of each tier. It's not just learning to speak, it's learning how to fit in with different social groups through language.
It's like code switching on another level, not just between languages, but between social identities.
Exactly.
Do you think would a low-class child have the same chance to learn the royal language as a high-class child?
That's where the inequality becomes really apparent. It's very likely that access to higher tier language education depends on your social class.
So it makes it that much harder to move up in society.
Right. It perpetuates those power dynamics.
We were talking about family language before, and made me think, what happens when people marry outside their family or community? Do they teach their partner their family language?
Yeah.
Or does it become a problem?
That's interesting, right? Because language can connect us, but it can also divide us.
Yeah.
Sharing your family language with a partner, that could be a beautiful thing, but it could also create tensions, misunderstandings if someone has trouble learning.
It's almost like a test for their relationship.
It is. Can their love overcome these language and cultural barriers?
And the spiritual language, what kind of impact do you think this top-tier language has on their beliefs, their rituals?
It's hard to know for sure, but it probably has a sense of power and mystery around it. Maybe it's a language they constructed just for spiritual ideas. And there could be rules about how you use it. Certain words, phrases, may be too sacred to say outside of certain rituals.
So it's not just about communicating with, like the divine.
No. It's about creating that sense of awe, that reverence, through language itself.
It's incredible how this language system impacts everything. Everyday talk, their deepest beliefs. We've been making a lot of guesses about how it might work in reality,
Yeah.
but we are working with limited information.
It's true. We're putting a puzzle together with only a few pieces.
Right.
But that's what makes it so interesting. It really lets us use our imagination.
It reminds us that even the most detailed document can't capture everything about a living language.
No, it can't. Language changes constantly. It adapts.
It reflects the people who use it.
Exactly.
I feel like we've covered so much in this deep dive, the benefits, the drawbacks of Qherexka's language system, how it impacts their social interactions, their beliefs, the challenges of learning it all.
It's been a fascinating look, and I think we've raised some important questions about language in general, how it shapes who we are, our chances in life, how we see the world.
Speaking of questions, in our last part, do you think we could bring this back to Earth? What can we as listeners learn from Qherexka's language system?
Absolutely. We don't have these formal language tiers, but the dynamics are still there. The power, the identity, the communication. Maybe in part 3, we can explore those parallels, see what lessons we can take away from this.
I love that. We'll be back soon to connect the dots and see what insights Qherexka offers about our own relationship with language. Welcome back to our final part on Qherexka's language system.
We've spent the last 2 parts really digging into the system. 8 tiers.
5 variations to learn.
Imagining how it all works, its impact on their society.
We've uncovered so much about language's power to shape who we are, the opportunities we get, even spiritual beliefs.
But now, as we wrap things up, I think we should consider what it all means for us here on Earth.
Right. We've been on this journey into this fictional world, but I feel like we're about to connect it back to our own lives.
Exactly. Because even though we don't have these super formal language hierarchies, the dynamics are still there. Power, identity, communication.
Okay, I'm ready to connect those dots. How do we start?
Well, let's think about social divisions based on language. We thought that in Qherexka, access to higher tier languages might be restricted by social class.
Right.
It sounds like sci-fi. But even in our world, small differences in language can have a big impact on how we see each other and treat each other.
I see what you mean. We don't have official tiers, but things like accents, dialects, even specific words we use.
Yeah.
They can all signal our background, education, even how smart people think we are.
Exactly. Take job interviews. Someone with a regional accent, they might be seen as less competent than someone with a more standard way of speaking, even if their skills are the same.
It's true. It makes you realize how strong those biases can be. We might not have these formal tiers, but there's still a hidden hierarchy. It's shaping our opportunities, our interactions.
It also makes you think about education, how that affects language. In Qherexka, they had this intense system to teach all those tiers. But in our world, access to good education isn't equal.
So educational inequality creates language inequality.
In a way, yes. It limits people's chances to learn the language skills that are valued in certain groups, which then limits their opportunities. A vicious cycle.
It really is. And this brings us back to a question we've been thinking about. How do we balance communication with the potential for social divisions? How do we make language a bridge, not a wall?
That's the big question, right? No easy answers. But maybe Qherexka gives us some hints.
What kind of hints?
Well, one thing was their emphasis on multilingualism. It sounds tough to learn 5 variations, but it also shows a society that values different languages and being able to connect with people from different backgrounds.
So maybe we need to change how we see language learning. Not a chore, not a barrier, but a way to understand the world better, connect with people who are different from us.
Imagine if we encouraged kids to learn multiple languages, not just for a job, but for the pure joy of it, exploring different cultures, ways of thinking.
Then language could be about building empathy, understanding, not about reinforcing divisions. A world where we celebrate our differences, but also find what we have in common.
Exactly. It might be a dream, but it's a good one to aim for. And even if we can't break down all the language barriers, we can make choices to promote inclusion and understanding.
What choices?
We can be more aware of how we use language ourselves, the assumptions we make about people based on how they talk, challenge our own biases, make an effort to listen to, learn from voices that are different from our own.
It's true. It's so easy to judge people by their accent or grammar. But we have to remember, language is just one part of who they are. There's so much more to find out if we listen with open minds and hearts.
We can also support programs that encourage language learning, cultural exchange, volunteering at a language school, donating to organizations that help immigrants. Lots of ways to get involved, make a difference.
It's about building bridges, not just across languages, but across cultures and communities.
And it all comes down to this. Language is powerful. It can be used for good or bad, to divide or unite, to oppress or empower. The choice is ours.
Such a powerful reminder. We take language for granted, but this deep dive has shown us just how amazing and complex it is. It shapes our thoughts, relationships, our whole view of the world.
So true. And I think it's time to say goodbye to Qherena.
It's been an amazing trip full of surprises. We started with one document and ended up exploring some of the biggest questions about language, society, and what it means to be human.
We hope you've enjoyed it. And keep thinking about the power of language and how it shapes our world.
Remember, words have power. Use them wisely. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.